One little letter is throwing off people's interpretations of the 9700X and 9600X CPUs quite a bit, because I'm going to come back to why they're being compared to the wrong predecessor processor, which is making a big difference in things like how we interpret power efficiency. Because, for example, if you look at the Gamers Nexus review, where they were overall, calling it a wasted opportunity, and when you look at the gaming performance showing not much of an improvement over the previous generation, they at least came back with, but there was a massive generational power efficiency improvement when compared against the 7700X. And that's true if you compare it against the 7700X. The problem is that nowhere on this chart is the 7700. And I'm not saying that Gamers Nexus did anything wrong. They included a ton of CPUs here. They, I think, tested even more that just didn't fit onto these charts, and we'll probably see even more on their website that they put up there. And not everybody can test every single CPU. But the problem is that I think we should be comparing against the 7700 non-X. Also, I've seen people talking about precision boost overdrive and whether that should be being used when looking at performance. Because I've been seeing a lot of people saying, well, okay, the 5% performance gains look a lot better if you allow PBO to go up to maximum settings. And then you can see these like 20% performance gains, and that can be true in tests like Cinebench R23. However, in this very same Gerbauer review, which a lot of people are citing as this product's way more exciting when you look at PBO, well, if you're focused on gaming performance though, most of his game testing here is actually showing, a couple percent difference at most when enabling PBO, meaning PBO did not give those massive performance gains in gaming workloads. So, I think that's one issue here, is the focus on whether we're focused on gaming performance or productivity performance, and if we're looking at efficiency, which processor are we actually comparing against? So I want you guys to bear with me as I make some sense out of these charts I pulled from Wikipedia, where we look at the 7000 series against what we have so far of the 9000 series, and why I think one little X is making these CPUs actually look better than they should, which is saying something considering they already don't look all that great. But okay, here's what a lot of people are doing and what I think AMD wanted people to look at, which is compare the 7700X up against the 9700X. And this makes sense. They're 8-core, 16 parts, and they both have the X on them. And there's a bit of a problem with this, though. The problem is that the 7700X is a 105 watt part, and the 9700X is a 65 watt part. So there's a pretty big difference on that power consumption, and this is what's happening when people are pointing out these huge efficiency gains generationally, is they're comparing a 105 watt part up against a 65 watt part. Now, this also is leading people to a more positive conclusion about pricing, because that 7700X 105 watt part came in at $399 MSRP. And the 9700X 65 watt part is coming in at a $359 MSRP. So what AMD is wanting people to notice here is that that is taking a $40 cut to the MSRP. And so a lot of people are discussing this as a good thing, although correctly bringing up that if you look at the 7700X in the current market, you can get it as low as $274. And suddenly this looks a lot less impressive if you're actually trying to buy a CPU in the current market. But my argument is that this is actually worse when we look at MSRPs as well, because, let me switch to maybe a different color here. Let's switch to green. Here's what I think we should actually be comparing for both efficiency and value, is the Ryzen 7700 non-X, because names can literally be anything. Names are almost meaningless. You can slap whatever name you want onto something. But if we're comparing products that were already available from the previous generation of Zen processors, the 7700 is also an 8-core 16-thread part, and it's coming in at 65 watts, just like the Ryzen 9700X is an 8-core 16-thread part coming in at 65 watts. And again, this is coming in at an MSRP of $359, but wait a minute, the 7700 65 watt part came in at $329. So if we look at that comparison, we're now not taking $40 off the MSRP. We're actually adding $30 to the MSRP. And it actually gets even worse than that, because notice that what this line also drew through. The Ryzen 7700 Non-X came with a boxed cooler, which adds value to a value-oriented build, because this being only a 65-watt part means that a Wraith Prism boxed cooler that comes with the product can actually get you pretty much the advertised performance. Maybe the sound level on the fans wouldn't be ideal, and a lot of people would end up upgrading the cooler on it. But if you are throwing together a value-oriented build, you could include that boxed that boxed processor. So not only are we gaining $30 to the MSRP, we're also losing a stock cooler. Now, but you might be like, well, okay, but the 7700X and 7700 don't perform the same. Well, the thing is, they actually perform extremely similarly. And also, that's because a lot of people accuse the 7700X and just generally the X products in the previous generation when they launched of being driven way too hard out of the box, which was leading them to run a lot hotter and a lot less efficiently than they needed to. And so if you did then compare it to the 65-watt part, and you didn't actually lose that much performance, just despite losing a lot of wattage. Now, it's a lot harder to find reviewers who are actually including the 7700 in their test results. In Hardware Unbox, original review of the 9700X, they didn't include the 7700 Non-X as a comparison point, but in their 9600X review, they actually followed up on this very idea, showing the Cinebench results of the 7700 against the 9700X, showing that overall they measure total system power rather than just the CPU, but the total system power was within 1 watt of each other, and getting 7% better performance in Cinebench 2024. So we're seeing about a 7% efficiency increase, as opposed to the 40-something% efficiency increases that a lot of people were seeing when comparing it against the X version of the previous generation part. So that suddenly takes away a lot of that efficiency argument. And we can make a lot of these same arguments about the 6-core part as well, where again, if I switch back to what I think AMD wants you to think about in red, AMD wants you to look at the 7600X and compare it to the 9600X because they're named similarly and they're both 6-core, 12-thread parts. However, if we take a look at the 7600X was a 105-watt part. It came in at $299. So AMD wants you to compare that to our 9600X, which is coming in at $279. And so they want you to see this as $20 off the MSRP. However, again, if I switch into green, let's look at the other way you could look at this. We've had a Ryzen 7600 Non-X available for a long time that comes with a Wraith Stealth cooler. That's a 65-watt part and came in at $229. And wait a minute, we're getting a 6-core 12-thread part here that comes in at 65 watts, doesn't include the stealth cooler, and comes in at $279. So rather than being a $20 decrease, if you compare it to the previous gen 65-watt part, this is actually even worse value. This is a $50 increase over the previous generation 65-watt part. So, and you're losing that boxed cooler, which again, for the most value-oriented builds, actually does save you $20 or $30 on a CPU cooler. So it looks even worse than that. So, and then again, you can get to looking at the actual market, where the 7600 has actually been available as low as $182 if I wanted to buy it today. And again, that comes with a boxed cooler. So that suddenly makes this look really bad. And so AMD at least wanted to show lower MSRPs. But again, I think if you look at these just against a different part that was available, I think is a better match. These are actually worse MSRPs and you lose the boxed cooler. And again, the efficiency proposition kind of flies out the window as well. So if we start to look at the overall performance here, you can see that the You know what, actually, let's pop over to Tech PowerUp. Let's look at Tech PowerUp's results, but again, if I flip through reviews here, you're gonna see that there's not massive differences depending on which outlet you look at. Certain games did see bigger performance gains, but on any outlet that reviewed a large number of games, you're seeing that the performance generationally is maybe a 5% gaming jump, and a lot of testing is actually showing even lower than that, and in certain games there's actually a performance regression. So let's look at the 9600X review from Tech PowerUp and focus on their 720p data. And they included PBO, and they included an overclock, and they included stock. Now notice that PBO, whereas maybe in your Cinebench results can get a massive performance jump, when we're looking at gaming results, we are just not seeing the same thing. So here we are seeing less than 2% improvement to gaming performance when allowed PBO to go to maximum, even less than that when just overclocking. And when compared against the previous generation, if we kind of scroll down here, the 7600X was reaching 94.8% of the performance. We were already within about 5% of gaming performance of the previous generation if you compare it to what AMD kind of wants you to. And if you look at the 7600 that doesn't have that X on it, notice we only lose 2% more performance relatively, meaning that we're now within about 7 or 8% of the performance of the newer generation when we're comparing 65 watt parts. So maybe generationally that makes your performance uplift look a little better. It's more like 7%, but that also means your efficiency gains while gaming is only about 7% because we're now comparing 65 watt parts to 65 watt parts rather than comparing up against the much less efficient X versions of the CPUs from the previous generation. So again, that's my take on the 9600X. Is compared to the 7600, you're getting less than 10% performance increase. Maybe we could call it 7% at the same power levels. It costs a lot more and you're losing the box cooler. And my take on the 9700X is very similar. If we look at the 9700X, again, using Tech PowerUp's data, again, lots of other review outlets. I watched and read pretty much all the reviews I could find out there on these. You get these type of results. The 9700X at stock compared to the PBO at maximum is less than 1% performance gain using PBO when we're actually looking at gaming performance. Their OC results actually saw a slight performance reduction, although all of these are so close, you could call it just margin of error. It's not a huge difference. If you compare it against the 7700X, we're within 4% of the performance. So you're seeing, a 4% difference generationally here when compared against the X product. And when compared against the non-X product, we're reaching 94.9% performance of the 9700X. We're within about 5% of the gaming performance when we're comparing the matched wattage parts. So when we're comparing 65 watt parts, we're now gaining about 5% performance at about the same power level. So yeah, the jokes about this being Zen 5% seem pretty dang accurate to me. This is about a 5% increase in performance when looking at the same wattages, and when allowing the wattages to go a lot higher, we're not seeing much gaming performance improvements. Now again, we're also losing the boxed cooler when compared against the non-X parts, and that's kind of rough. Again, I've been seeing this Derbauer result showing the massive increase with PBO enabled thrown around out there as people just not setting these up properly or not looking at what potential is available. And I think that is only going to be true in certain workloads. But again, even within that same review, the gaming tests did not show that same result. And we're seeing Tech PowerUp also showing that gaming performance not massively improved with PBO. And again, we're also seeing Hardware Unboxed confirming again that even in Cinebench, when you're not using PBO, the power efficiency of the 9700X compared against the other 65 watt part is only about a 7% power efficiency gain. So again, my overall take on all of this is that the reviews got massively confused by that X in the naming scheme. that's going to make this look like a much bigger efficiency gain than it actually is, especially when you're looking at gaming, where I think we're getting single-digit efficiency improvements for gaming, and we're getting single-digit performance improvements for gaming. We're doing all of that at actually an increase to the MSRP when compared against the previous 65-watt part, and the loss of a box cooler, and compared to the prices you can actually buy the previous generation, which again gets you basically tied performance, we're seeing it as extremely bad value. So these 9600X and 9700X parts don't make sense for a gaming build until their prices come down massively, or I guess the 7000 series dries up in availability. And unfortunately, that's my take on all of this. And so, I think really when you compare it against the parts that make the most sense to compare it against, you kind of lose even that efficiency improvement. Now, where it can, I think, make the most sense as a positive review is in reviewers who are less focused on the gaming side of things. So AMD did make a lot of revisions to the overall architecture, which benefits certain workloads. You can hear my kids running around upstairs, so we didn't lose that at the new house. So anyway. So for old time's sake, there you go. Anyway, in certain workloads, especially things with like AVX 512 and certain forward-looking changes, I think this is kind of nice. I also don't hate moving to 65 watts as our baseline, because I think that made a lot more sense with the previous generation as well. And I think trying to get these CPUs down to the peak of their efficiency curve makes a lot of sense. So I don't hate that. I really don't think these are terrible processors at all if the price is right. But what we need to do is we need to see the 9600X down here around $180. And then still it's not all that exciting because the 7600 was already basically doing that for a while now within, single digit performance differences with the boxed cooler. So still not all that exciting. And then if we look at the 7700, again, down here around $280, okay, if we start seeing the 9700X available around this price point, then it starts to at least be okay. But again, you still lose the boxed cooler and you're still only gaining about 5% performance at that wattage. So again, when we're talking about gaming. So sure, there are certain workloads where these are a much more exciting product, but my channel focuses on gaming. And so if you're interested in gaming, yeah, I've got to give a pretty negative reaction to overall where we're at with these things. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section, and also expect a video coming out from me very soon talking about the updates to Intel, because Intel, notice, hasn't really featured in anything I'm discussing here because of all their stability issues, but their new microcode has launched today, at least for some motherboards, so expect an upcoming video to talk a lot more about that. And I hope you guys found this video useful and or interesting. A huge thank you to viewers, subscribers, and especially channel members who have clicked the join button down below to directly support the channel financially. If you find what I do here useful and or interesting and would like to support it, feel free to click that join button, get membership badges on your comments, early access to some videos, all of that. And I hope all of you have an excellent day.